Good afternoon.
And what a lovely afternoon it is.
Welcome to this snowy day at the Teachers Retirement System regular board meeting for November 15th, 2018. Patricia, would you please call the roll?
Ron Adler.
I am here.
Thomas Brown.
Here.
David Kazansky.
Present.
Lindsay Oaks. Here. Deborah Penny.
Here.
John Dawson. I'm sorry.
I'm here for John Dawson.
Susanna.
Okay. So I think we have a quorum.
We do.
Okay, great. Before we move into our agenda, I'd just like to ask Sam Lumley from the Office of the Actuary to make an introduction.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to introduce to the board a colleague that works, he's a manager in the Actuarial Services Division at the Office of the Actuary. This is Dolores Capone, and she's part of the Chief Actuary's succession planning scenario, along with her idea of having professional staff development. And finally, just to give the board some continuity with a familiar face, so if you need to contact someone, Dolores is the individual. So thank you.
Okay, welcome, Dolores.
Welcome.
Thanks.
All right, with that, we'll move ahead with the agenda.
Okay, next is an update on TRS operations. Kavita Conroy is going to give that to us.
Thank you, Patricia. Members have been notified that their account statements for the third quarter of 2018 are now available. On November 5th, quarterly account statements were posted on our website for approximately 125,000 members who are currently in service or on leave. Mailing of these statements will occur between November 16th and November 19th. On October 30th, TDA quarterly statements were posted online for approximately 56,000 members who have TDA deferral status. Mailing occurred on November 5th. And finally, the TDA quarterly statements for TDA beneficiary participants were mailed to a population of approximately 1,000 members on October 24th. Earlier this fall, we informed our members that the third quarter account statements would be the last one they received by mail. Future account statements will be available on our secure website. This is the latest step in our strategic effort towards more paperless operations. The fall 2018 issues of our member newsletters have been published and are posted on our website. In-service news will be mailed to our non-retired members over the next week, and benefits report will be mailed to our retirees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you send that to us electronically?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so next is the Executive Director's report. And the first item there, before I get to that, I did want to let everybody know that you've gotten a new investment and board meeting schedule as a handout. There has been a change, which is highlighted in yellow.
That's a change that had previously been sent out to us?
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm just making sure everybody has.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the Executive Director's report, and the next item is the matter of the minutes, and it's been the next meeting, and it's been suggested that the next regular meeting of the Teachers Retirement Board be held on the third Thursday of the month, December 20th, 2018. Next is the adoption of revised proxy voting guidelines.
Please skip to the result.
Resolved, the Retirement Board hereby ratifies adoption of the revised proxy voting guidelines for the Teachers Retirement System.
Okay, so this is a ratification really of a vote that we took, or that the committee, it's the committee's recommendation, the proxy committee's recommendation to the full board. So can we have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
We'll take Ms. Vickers. I think she was in under the wire. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion to ratify adoption of the revised proxy voting guidelines, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
The next item on the agenda is attendance at a conference. And the following resolution is presented for consideration of possible adoption. Resolved that the trustees of the Teachers Retirement Board hereby approve the attendance and participation of the executive director and or her designees and any interested trustee at the National Conference on Public Employee Retirement Systems Legislative Conference from January 27th through January 29th, 2019.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kaczynski. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve attendance at the NC PERS Legislative Conference in January, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Okay, next on the agenda is the matter of the calendar. And the first item is the approval of all of the SIM minutes from 10/17/2018, the investment meeting minutes from 10/4/2018, and the board meetings from 10/18/2018.
Okay, so first let me just see if anyone has any comments or changes for any of those minutes. Okay, seeing none, can we get a motion to approve all the minutes that Patricia just read off?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Vickers. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Penny. Any discussion? Right, all in favor of approval of the motion approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Next is the calendar, and you've all received an electronic version of the calendar.
Please waive the reading of the calendar.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the calendar in front of us. Is there a motion to approve adoption of the calendar?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kisner. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Next, under other business, we have a presentation by CEO.
Okay.
All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Pleasure to be here. I come from less snowy Canada to very snowy New York. My name is Paul Martiniello. I'm a director with CM Benchmarking, which I understand most people in the room know who we are and what we do. I recognize a couple of faces. But that said, I did want to just spend a couple minutes giving a bit of context as to the service that we provide on the pension administration benchmarking and the results that we're going to that I'm going to review with you this afternoon. So our pension administration benchmarking service looks at both your costs and service within a we basically do an analysis and a comparison amongst a peer group that essentially addresses whether or not your system is adding value based on what you're spending, so value for money. And those two elements of our report are what I'm going to review in the next few minutes. That said, there's also a global best practice piece which I wanted to just highlight. And that has to do with the fact that, as you can appreciate, when we work with just pension plans all over the world, and we have the luxury, if you will, and benefit of dealing with experts in the pension field like those in TRSNYC amongst the others in our database. And as a result, there's a lot of sharing of best practices and experiences that everybody values, and it's done either virtually, online, through a platform we have, as well as conferences that we run once a year, and also we conduct some research. So I just want to mention that and also give kudos to the team here at TRS in New York. I've known Kavita and a few others like Joanne and Matt for several years, and they've been great contributors to that effort, so I look forward to that as we move forward. And the last bit of context I want to add is CEM is an acronym for cost effectiveness measurement, and I think that's important just to bring out, because essentially cost effectiveness is really about the cost benefit dynamic. So it's not just reducing costs or being obsessed with reducing costs. Obviously, that's always a good thing. I think what's most important is understanding the value that your system is providing to your members, given what you're spending, and at the same time managing costs. So that's just a point that I wanted to bring out. And you know, we've seen trends that speak to our global best practices that really support this. There's three main ones that I can highlight. Primarily, number one is, and they're all interrelated, and I would hope these all resonate with you, cost effectiveness and all the various initiatives that go into making a system more cost effective. There's focus on member communication, all things member communication and engagement, which obviously are important to your member base, and it's become something that we've seen that's increasingly more important in the last several years. And the last one is system modernizations. This is a trend we've seen right throughout our database, and there's various reasons why systems are modernizing, starting with strategic reasons, so your drive to maybe go more member-centric, for example, obsolescence of your systems because they're just at the stage where they need to be updated, and the last one is complexity, or dealing with increased complexity in your system, of which, as you can appreciate, these are all interrelated. If your system's obsolete, then you're not going to be able to implement those. So those are trends we've seen throughout our database, and I wanted to bring those up front because they do add some color to the results we're going to see. With regards to our global database, I'm not going to spend time here going into the details, but just to remind everybody, it is a global database. We do work with pension plans all over the world, except for a few that we're still trying to, and we've made some progress on in some European countries where we're not present, even some African Asian countries, as well as Latin America. We've got some focus on that, and hopefully in the next year or so we'll see some more of those systems added to the global picture. But what's more important for the purposes of our analysis and the results I'm going to show is the custom peer group that we've established for your system, Teachers of New York. Specifically, we have put together a peer group of 14 systems that include yours, in which we bound the peers around you by size, specifically size of number of active members and annuitants. And the reason we focus on active members and annuitants and remove the inactives is because we know from experience that active members and annuitants are what primarily drive administration costs. And so, as you can see, your system is very close to the median. The other couple things I want to highlight from this peer group are two things. One is the fact that this is consistent year over year, so it's the same peer group as we compared to you last year, so that provides some consistency in our comparisons, especially when we look at trends. And then the third thing is I took a look at your member mix in terms of your percentage of actives and annuitants compared to your peer average, and you're very close. As a matter of fact, your system has about 4% more actives and annuitants than your peer average, but very well aligned so that there's not a lot of noise, if you will, with you having, say, more actives than your peer group. All right, so let's look at some numbers. Your total pension administration cost of $52 million, and by the way, these are numbers for 2017, just so we're clear. I hadn't, maybe I didn't make that clear up front. $52 million, which translates to a cost of $235 per active member and annuitant, which when we compare you to the peer group, the peer average of $115, it puts you at $120 more than the peer average. So what we then ask at CM is why? Why is your cost higher in this case than the peer average? And we've got a model that basically breaks down the reasons, which I'm going to go into. Before I go into the details of that particular model, though, I just wanted to highlight the complexity factor of your particular system, which I don't think I need to tell anybody in this room. You're a fairly complex system. We measure that relative to other systems, not only in your peer group, but also the universe. So this chart you're looking at, the dark blue is you, then the middle blue is your peers, and the remainder are the universe. And you can see that basically when we look at your complexity, you're the third highest in not only in your peer group, but in the universe. And by complexity, it reflects basically your policy and things that are typically out of control from a management's perspective, but I'd like to bring that to your attention here because it does add some context around the fact that complexity does have an impact on administration costs. And in the case of a system like yours, which is going through a system modernization project, it can also have increased costs because of the things that you have to contend with when you're putting that system in place. So back to the model and why your costs are $120 above the peer average. So we at CM have a model whereby we have 6 key drivers that we go through. The first one is economies of scale, which is a non-issue in the case of your system. The second two, number 2 and 3, have to do with transactions. The first one is the number of transactions that your system processes per member, so it really reflects workloads. And the other element of that is the productivity side, which is how many transactions your FTE process and how effectively do they do that. So you can see that the higher transactions per member in your case increased your costs per member above the peer average by $60, and there's a bit of an offset there of about $20 in terms of the productivity. And we're going to go into some of this in a bit more detail. The fourth element has to do with costs that vary by FTE. So when you add an FTE to your system, basically you obviously have salaries and benefits, but there's also things like building utilities, HR, and IT desktop, for example, that can be impacted. Here we have a slight impact of $3.52 that we'll look at a little bit closer. We also look at third-party costs that relate to just front office activities, and by front office, I'm referring to the way we define it at CM are activities that come into contact with members and or employers. Okay, and you basically have lower third-party costs with respect to those types of transactions. And then the last key driver has to do with basically paying more or less for back office activities. And by back office, we're talking about basically support activities such as governance, the major project, which in this case will be your system administration, IT strategy, actuarial, legal, etc. I just want to point one thing out, that this is an exception that I guess an additional calculation we made for your system that you see there to the right that has an asterisk on it, specifically next to major projects. And that's due to the fact that there was some questions around, okay, well here at TRSNYC we expense our major projects on an annual basis versus other systems may amortize it over a longer period. So what's the impact? Well, you can see that we did a calculation with an assumption of 8-year amortization, which is as far as we've got the data for yourselves that we could actually do this calculation. You can see the difference is there is a bit of a difference. It's not really material. Your cost would have been $62 more than the peer average versus the 71. And just as a side note, I will say within your peer group, there's only 3 that are not conducting system administration projects, and within those 3, the majority actually they do a both. Some amortize or capitalize some of the costs, and others expense it. There's usually a mix of, so they capitalize some and they expense other parts of that. So and then like yourselves, there's I believe 3 that just expense it fully. Okay, so just to make sure that everybody's clear that you're in a very comparable group with regards to that, so I wouldn't be too concerned. Now, let's go into a bit more details as to some of the more material drivers behind the cost. The transactions per volume. So this one is interesting. First of all, transaction volumes, we know through our experience, are a key driver of cost, so it is something to take a look at. As you can see in the case of your system, it was substantially higher than the peer average by 193%, which led to an increase of total cost per member by $60.18. And we're going to see in a few minutes, actually not a few minutes, in a few seconds, because I'm going to flip to the slide, a little bit more of the detail, and I apologize, it's a little bit hard to read, but I just wanted to drive down what those transactions look like. So I'm not going to go into all of this, but this is what I referred to earlier as the front office transactions. So there's everything that comes into contact with members in terms of things like putting pensions into pay, accepting new members, withdrawals, etc., and everything to do with member communication. And the third bucket is your data collection and data maintenance with respect to the work you do with employers. So specifically, the difference here in the driver for TRSNYC has to do with what I've come to learn about your system is the deficit of credited service that you have with your teachers and the collection of that on a retroactive basis. And I understand there's two elements. There's just the normal course of business that happens with teachers on an ongoing basis. And then there's a more exceptional situation where you've got this 5-year contract with the union that there's a whole bunch of these being processed and happened for a couple years, and this will drop off in about 3 years' time in 2020. And that second element is what really has driven the transactions up, in particular with what we're labeling here 1D, the purchases and transfer in. And so that is one of the more expensive types of transactions. So that's what's really driving the cost relative to the peer average for your system. And when that drops off, I did a quick calculation. If it drops off to the numbers that the management team told me it would drop off, it would be a 75% drop off, which is going to have a substantial impact on that. The other two activities I wanted to point out are, the first one is calls. It's listed there as calls and emails, but really we're talking about call volumes. As you can see, they're also substantially higher than the peer average. That I also understand is driven a lot by the same issue with deficit accredited service, where letters are sent to members and there's a definitive spike in call volumes that are seen. A lot of members calling for status updates on this situation, which I'm also told will be online shortly, and that will ideally have an impact on less calls as well. And then the third one is the member counseling on one-on-one. We've seen an increase on that in that activity in the past year, which has an additive cost to it. However, I will tell you, jumping ahead, is to the service side. We've also seen an increase in your service scores as a result of one-on-one counseling, which members love, right? That's a very valued service, albeit kind of an expensive one too. In terms of the productivity, I'm not going to really say much more about this. Like I said, there's an offset in the case of TRSNYC. Your staff, if you look at transactions per FTE and what's processed, you process more transactions per FTE than peers in a few areas, but not surprisingly, it's what we just saw with respect to the purchases, transfer-ins, as well as the handling of those calls. Okay, so that has the effect of dropping the cost by, in this case, $20.27 relative to the peer average. In terms of actual cost per FTE, these are, as I mentioned earlier, the costs that vary per FTE. You can see that if we look at the total, your total cost per FTE increased by $3.52 relative to the peer average. Two components to highlight here. The first is the fact that major project staff costs are higher, and I think that's potentially to be expected given where you're at with your project. And I just want to clarify that this does include, so this includes all staff that are under the management of TRS, of which some are consultants that are part of that. So that's the definition. The other component to this is the fact that buildings and utilities are quite a bit higher, and that has to do with your environment in which you work in. Just as a note on the major project costs and staff, I just want to add some color again on a global perspective. I've seen, we took a look at numbers in our universe database that for 2000 to 2016, I don't have the 17 numbers, but we saw an increase in costs of major projects and IT of 17% per annum every year for those 7 years. We would like to say we've seen a reduction in costs in other activities, like member-facing activities. I think the jury's still out on that. It's still a little bit early because we don't have enough data, but I think we will. That's the expectation. But what we have seen is absolutely an increase in the amount of online activity Members are going online into the secure portion of websites for our systems to the tune of 9% increase annually over that same time period. So we hope that as we move forward, the benefits of the work that's being done on system admin will show some efficiencies. They're certainly starting to show some addition to member utility and what they can do
Paul,
online.
can I just ask you a question?
Sure.
So, the building utilities, that's a huge disparity there. So is that based on just the cost of our rent and the associated costs?
Correct. That's what I suspect, exactly.
Okay, and the salary stuff, that includes fringes. It says salaries and benefits, so that includes healthcare and pension costs. Is that right? Or not? 'Cause the pension costs are not included in our budget, I don't believe. So
It does include salaries and benefits. So benefits, if the healthcare for your, or the pensions for your staff.
yeah,
or
it's
your-
just that you may not know whether, because remember our budget doesn't include the
Does not include
I
that.
don't
I don't know
believe
how they.
Right,
calculate this,
okay,
but our budget
just
doesn't
curious, that's
include
fine.
But you can look that our staff are paid less than our peer average.
Although that may be because they're not including the pension costs, whereas others are.
Yeah, right.
You know, it may not be an apples to apples comparison. That's what I was
Well, we're
curious
supposed
about.
to be all doing the same thing.
I know, but because our budget doesn't include our pension costs now, the most recent budget, we just did an asterisk, remember? But previously it wasn't in there at all, so my guess is it's not in there. Anyway, it's just a
Right.
curiosity.
I'm not going to spend time on this next slide because it does speak a bit more to the cost environment. This is in comparison to to the other peers that we're comparing you to, and you can see that in the case of yourselves, based on where you're located, you do have the highest cost environment. In terms of back office activities, now looking at what you're actually paying for these back office activities relative to the peers, you can see that there's really two components that are higher, and the first is governance and financial controls. So governance, that includes financial administration, control, board, strategy, policy, as well as government public relations. That's all bucketed into that. So you spend more than your peers on that, which leads to $12.41 increase. And then the other one, which is by far the major one, and I think what everybody's aware of, but is the major projects, which, like I said, it's there's a trend out there, and we're hoping that at some point in time, benefits will be seen with regards to that kind of investment. I'm very curious to see how that unfolds. Now, I'm going to switch gears. So we've gone through costs. I'm going to go to the other side, and that's service. So we have a very in-depth survey of 120 questions on service-related items, and these are items that are deemed value add to your members. And that allows us to basically score your system on a scale of 1 to 100 as to where you are in service and compare that to the peers. And you can see that your total service score of 76 was below the peer median of 84, but I will say it has increased significantly since last year, and I'm going to go into that in a couple of slides. What I do want to highlight here is a couple of things. First of all, the goal is not to be 100. That's just not cost effective. It really, this part of the report really is useful for the management team to assess where they're different from their peer groups, and basically look at where they may be able to add certain services, or quite frankly even reduce. You can go the other way around. At the end of the day, it has to be services that are valued by your member base, and that's what's most important. So to look at some of the key service metrics that we include in the score, these 5 in particular are ones that we measure right across the board and highlight in the executive summary because they're important to members at the end of the day. The first one is member contacts, and within that specifically the percentage of calls resulting in undesired call outcomes, as well as the average total wait time, including time negotiating auto attendance. And you can see that for TRSNYC, it's been since 2014 an improvement and a tremendous one at that. So kudos to the team here for that. Especially, I would say the first one, percentage of calls and undesired call outcomes. Those, well, both of those things are going to help and have helped improve the service score. And more importantly, I'm sure your members are quite pleased by that. In terms of the website, you've gone from 9 online tools to 12 in the past year, and that's also fantastic. A little bit less than the peer average of 14, but I also understand that will continue to improve with the implementation of your new pension system. In terms of one-on-one counseling, right here what we're showing is really the percentage of of your active membership that attend one-on-one counseling, as well as the second bullet speaks to the percentage of your active membership that attend presentations. And in both cases, they're substantially higher than the peer average, which reflects engagement by your member base. The fourth one in pension inceptions has to do with how quick you can turn a pension or put a pension into pay and make sure that there's no gap between their paycheck and their now pension pay. You guys are at the top of the game there, so I have nothing really to add, and that's been consistent year over year. In terms of member statements as well, I don't really have anything to add. You have current material in terms of the data for member statements, as well as you provide estimates on the member statement as to what they can expect in the future with their pension, which is also something that's highly valued and it's been proven to increase engagement by members. So looking at your specific score and why has it gone up from 70 to 76 in this last year, and you can see here the trend from 2014 and up to 2017. I've already talked about the call center, so I'm not going to review that, as well as the website. Mentioned the reasons behind that. On the one-on-one counseling, it's the one improvement there that had an impact this past year is that you now provide real-time written benefit estimates and service credit cost estimates. And in terms of satisfaction surveying, you're surveying on the one-on-one counseling, focused primarily on that activity, which is excellent. Now, can this be improved? Like it always can be improved. Like I said, the goal is not to get to 100, but there's always room for improvement. And our report actually goes into quite a bit of detail as to the areas that you can improve and by how much, based on our model, how many points you would gain. I've just highlighted 3 of the more material ones here, of which the first one has to do with satisfaction surveying. So essentially, the more satisfaction surveying that you do of your members on transactions that are deemed important to them, like putting pensions into pay, like telephone calls, written estimates, the purchase transfers, etc., the better service score you'll have. In terms of menu layers on your phone call tree, the fewer the better. So there's room for improvement there. And then lastly, with regards to reaching a knowledgeable person, as the numbers earlier showed, tremendous improvement to get to 137 seconds. There's still room to improve based, again, on our model. Whether or not that makes sense for your system is something only you can decide, but that's something that can be looked at. Now, I have heard from management that all 3 of these things are being worked on, and there will be improvements to the score the way we calculate it, if not in 2018, by 2019. So now to put it back together in terms of costs and service, I'm not going to repeat everything you've just heard. The costs, as you know, are above your peer average, and we know why. The primary reasons being your major project system administration, modernization work, as well as this somewhat unique spike in processing of transactions. And on the flip side, though, your service score is improved. So really, it's going in the direction you want to see. Your costs are being maintained, and your service score is going up, which leads back to my earlier comment about looking at more of the dynamic between cost and benefit, and making sure you're ideally providing quality service to your members while maintaining your costs. So that's my presentation. I hope I stay within the time. I did want to give thanks to Kavita and Michael and all the others on the team that spend the time to provide us with the data, because without that, none of this could be possible. And we'll open the floor to any questions.
Questions for Paul? Can we get a copy of the presentation? Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your time, Paul.
And let me just say congratulations to the team on the service improvement. It's really a very substantial improvement over the past year. So that's great work.
Thank you.
Teachers are always happy to see the grades go up.
Okay, questions, comments from the public? Thank you, Mel, to the public. Okay, anything else for our public agenda? So I think we have a matter we need to take up in executive session. So can we have a motion to exit public and go into executive session?
Sure. I move pursuant to Public Offices Law, Section 105, to go into executive session for discussions regarding specific contract matters.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to exit public session and go into executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, we're back in public session. Susan, would you please report out of executive session?
In executive session, certain investment contract matters were discussed. Consensus was reached, which will be announced at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Anything further for today? Seeing nothing, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Vickers. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
I think it's unanimous. The meeting is adjourned.
What's it on this?